me with 52 little braids sticking out from beneath my graduation cap that night. I had previously tried a few times to put my hair into dreadlocks to no avail, so my boss's wife figured she would have this done for me as it was my next idea. I was a valedictorian at the graduation ceremony, and gave a good speech, even pointing out that my grandma and grandpa, who were also on the stage with me, grandma being a teacher's aide at my high school and grandpa being on the board at the local school district. My parents had given me the ultimatum about a week before I finished school in March to either get a job or a job in a different place to live within 2 weeks. I had done both in 1 week, and I was doing well, considering all the obstacles I had overcome to get to where I was. That summer, I had the brilliant idea to move in with a friend at his parents' house about 15 or 20 miles away from my job. I could not see myself riding my bicycle to work and back while working full-time hours, and my friend's dad was not going to give him money for gas to be my personal driver. So my buddy and I spent the summer going to meetings and hanging out at his house. He drove me around while I did the whole looking for work thing, but I never did find a job that summer. I was going out with a girl I had met at a campground when my buddy and I were at a recovery campout earlier that summer. Toward the end of the summer, my friend went with his family on a mini vacation for the weekend. Before they left, his dad told me that since I had been unable to find a job and had no means to pay rent or anything, I needed to find another place to live before they returned at the end of the weekend. I called my girlfriend, thinking that she would come up with something that we could come up with something between the two of us, so far as a solution. She drove to the house and we talked for a short time before she broke up with me. Well, what could I have expected? Here I was, no job and about to be homeless. I didn't expect her to break up with me, but maybe she had been wanting to do it for some other reason anyway. I didn't feel like riding my bike when I left the house on Saturday afternoon, not too long after my girlfriend left, so I left on foot. I walked about 15 miles back toward my hometown, getting close to town not too long after sunset. I had to go to the bathroom, and I was coming up on a friend's house anyway, so I stopped there. He offered me a couch to sleep on, so I stayed there a couple of nights. I had stopped by the store where my old boss's wife worked and talked to her about the events that had recently transpired. That night, I went to a meeting in town and ran into my old boss. He said he had talked to his wife, and they decided I could have my old room and job back. Yay! I took the opportunity, and I was living the dream again so far as having a job, a place to live, and money in my pocket. I had gone down and gotten my bike and the majority of my belongings from my friend's house that I had been kicked out of. My friend's dad had put some of my belongings in the back of his old pickup out in the yard, and they were ruined by being rained on. While the majority of my stuff was perfectly fine since it had been piled on their front porch, which had a roof over it. That sort of sucked, but if I had contacted them sooner, maybe they would not have been so hasty about tossing my stuff out in the open. I was ticked off about it, but in the end it was my fault for leaving my stuff there when I had been kicked out. My job was going well, and I was doing great for a few months, as I had already said. And I even did my first long-distance bicycle ride during that time. In late 1994, people in the fellowship began talking about going to their international convention in San Diego. Some of my friends were carpooling. In 1994, people in the 12-step fellowship I was a member of began talking about going to the international convention in San Diego. Some of my friends were carpooling and some of them were flying down there. I was thinking that I would like to go, so I sent in my registration form and the fee to get me into the festivities that coming summer. Then I was thinking about transportation. How was I going to get to San Diego and back? I was talking about it one day, and I was talking about it at a meeting one day, and one of my friends suggested, "Shane, you ride your bicycle everywhere you go. Why not ride it to the convention?" That had never crossed my mind, but it sounded like a feasible idea. My buddy also suggested that I get people to sponsor me so that I had enough money to complete my trek. It was on. One of my friends even loaned me the money to get a better bike to ride to San Diego. I replaced the department store $80 special bike I had been riding with a slightly used 21-speed Sakai mountain bike, which I bought slicks for since it's a whole lot easier to ride on pavement without fat tread on your tires. When I was not working, I was training or trying to raise funds for my trek to California. I planned my trip in the simplest way. I looked at a map, decided on the route I would take, roughly figured how long it would take me, and added a couple extra days for wiggle room, and packed a few extra clothes in a backpack. To begin my ride, a friend gave me a ride to Aberdeen, Washington, where I stayed the night in a motel and double, even triple checked my backpack and saddlebags to make sure I had everything I would need for the road. I had been very thorough before I had even left the house, but it never hurts to check again. It really sucks to get out on the open road with no stores around and then realize that you don't have something you should have brought along. I got a halfway decent night's sleep and was hitting the road as the sun was just emerging from the eastern horizon. It was just me, my bike, and the road for the first day. Oh yeah, and my Walkman, blaring Rage Against the Machine into my earphones. I was doing it, bicycling hundreds of miles down the highway when doctors had at one time given me the prognosis of being unable to even walk. God is good. Somewhere along the way, I was getting bored with just one cassette tape of music, so the next department store I came to, I went in and picked up White Zombie Astro Creep 2000. That was just the kick I needed to get pumped up again. At any rate, I definitely put on some miles on that first day, making it to Astoria, Oregon. I don't even remember the name of the motel I stayed at that night, only that it was the first inexpensive vacancy I found. In the morning, I was in the lobby of the motel eating donuts and drinking coffee when I happened to meet some fellow travelers. There were a group of 3 friends, 2 guys and a gal, who were also riding south on Highway 101, cycling, as they were on a summertime adventure. I hooked up with them and we rode to Seaside, Oregon, stopping at a youth hostel and stayed the night there. I loved it. The hostel was only $15 a night, whereas motel room had cost me at least 3 times that much. It was not as nice as a motel, but I just needed a place to crash for the night, so it worked perfect. In the morning, I found that my new cycling friends were not leaving right away as they needed a day of rest. So I opted to just stay put and rest up as well. The young lady in the group asked me if I would like to accompany her into town for some shopping, at which I agreed to go with her since I am always game to explore new places. That day, I ate my first ever veggie burger, which I bought when we stopped at a fast food type health food cafe. We didn't do much shopping that day as my riding buddy had intended to do. We were just leisurely cruising around town, me just enjoying being in a new place while she was checking in with friends she had not seen in a very long time as she used to live nearby. I spent one more night there, and when I awoke in the morning, got my bags and bike ready to head out on the road, and then went to the lobby and drank some coffee and ate a couple of pastries before my cycling companions emerged from their bunks. When they came outside, they informed me they had decided to ride back up by Portland, and that I was more than welcome to continue riding with them. It was an enticing invitation, yet I had to decline since I was on somewhat of a schedule, and did have to make it to San Diego for the convention that I was going to. We said our goodbyes and took off riding in separate directions. Their original trio of cyclists back to the north and myself to the south. I was determined to put on some serious miles that day, so I was definitely pumping those pedals as fast as I could pump them. Maybe I was a little too determined that day. Maybe I was a little too determined that day. I made it to a point about 20 miles north of Newport, around there, and my legs cramped up really bad as I was cycling up a long, gradual incline. I had cycled about 95 miles that day, and none of it was done casually. I had drank plenty of water, eaten plenty of high-energy snacks, including a couple of bananas for potassium, and I had taken a few little breaks. It was just too much for my legs that day, I guess, because as I sat on the bank of the highway, resting, stretching, and snacking, the cramps were not leaving my legs. As I sat there, the thought entered my mind that it was mid-afternoon, and at that time I did not have the foggiest idea how far I had to go until I was in a town where I could crash for the night. I was starting to tire and my legs were still cramping, so it was obvious to me that I was not moving too soon of my own strength. I stuck out my thumb and said a little prayer. God, if it's your will, please help me get to San Diego. Not more than 2 minutes passed when the next car, which happened to be a VW bus, early 70s model, came along and stopped on the shoulder right in front of me. It happened to be a couple of acquaintances of mine from one of the various schools I attended, which we figured it out at that time, but I forget now. They were on their way to Newport to go surfing, and then they were going to Bend to stay a few days in their grandparents' cabin. The hippie bus was set up as a camper, complete with a sink and small stove. They had just enough room left inside the van for me, my bike, and my bags, and I was scrunched down in a really tight spot right behind the passenger seat. I went surfing with them when we reached Newport, although I only went out and came back in one time. They both told me I did really well considering I had never surfed before. I had skateboarded in my early teens, but that had been so long ago. I was surprised at my ability to remain standing on the surfboard at all. After we had surfed, I opted to take their offer to drop me off in Albany, Oregon, which Interstate 5 runs right through. I was just by there. I was just in Albany not too long ago. But I had... Oh, that's right. On my way back from Carson City, Nevada, I stopped by there. Anyway, I had them drop me off at the Motel 6 right by the freeway, since that was the way I was most likely going in the morning. I crashed in the motel room for the night, making my plans for the following morning. I woke early and was out the door soon after the sun rose. My plan was to take a Greyhound bus the rest of the way to San Diego, so I wanted to find the local bus station as early as I could so as not to miss the bus in case it came through early in the day. I found the bus depot, which turned out to be a convenience store where the bus stopped in Albany. I went in the store and purchased a ticket to San Diego. When I got to talking to the guy who had sold me the bus ticket, he let me know Greyhound did not let people transport their bicycles, but that he would